Welcome to the final session of the Virtual Summit on Just Transition. I'm Vasta Vijayanayaka, Executive Director of Strike and Trust. And we have a lineup of speakers from different organizations who are co-leads and contributing panelists, experts who joined us in the sessions that we held over the 2 days. We had 3 thematic sessions focusing on the food sector, the energy sector, and then the cross-cutting ones, and including this and the opening session, we had 5 sessions altogether. To open the closing session, we have Mr. Riyad, who's a senior principal advisor on small island developing states at the UNDP, who will be giving the opening speech for the closing sessions. And then we'll move on to the panelists who would provide the inputs and insights from the discussions we had in the sessions. Riyad, over to you.
Thank you very much. First of all, allow me to congratulate Strike and Trust and its partner for hosting this important event and inviting UNDP to be here today. The COVID-19 crisis is nothing we have known in modern times, but it has also proved that solidarity is the best weapon, not only against the virus, but in combating the dual nature climate crisis and socio-economic injustice that have brought us here in the first place and have exacerbated the impact of the pandemic. We are here today because we all acknowledge and understand the import of our individual collective obligation to not only combat this crisis, but recognize it is a tipping point to embark on a new development model in our existential fight against climate change and to protect our nature world, the subject of UNDP Human Development Report, which will be released on 15th of December. We are presented with an unprecedented opportunity to fundamentally restructure the economies so they are more equitable, resilient to environmental, social, and economic shocks, and can achieve net zero emission by 2050. And so doing, accelerate progress on the Sustainable Development Goals and Paris Agreement. We are facing a historic inflection point as human activity has overstepped our planetary boundaries and at the same time left too many people behind despite our pursuit for a more inclusive, prosperous future for all. We must reestablish, or in some cases newly establish, social values and norms that are the blue blinding all societies. As nations strive to recover from COVID-19 pandemic and its devastating impact, urgent decarbonization and halting environmental degradation remain critically necessary. Recovery plan will determine the course of the next 30 years and present a historic chance to leap forward and seize economic, social, political advantages of green, just, sustainable future for all. Ensuring a just transition must be at the center of policy and fiscal decision. We must consider the impact of our recovery choices on vulnerable households and workers in the formal and informal sectors over time, including through social protection and other public services. The pandemic provides the opportunity to review the macroeconomic choices and development path required to build resilience for all people. We must double down on the belief that people's agencies empowerment can bring about the action we need if we are to live in the balance with the planet in a fairer world. UNDP emphasized green economy as one of the 4 key pillars to our beyond recovery strategy alongside social protection, digital disruption, and governance. Aspiration and approaches for promoting a just transition to green economy that leave no one behind serves as a blueprint for both why and how countries will emerge from the current health and social economic emergency in ways that respond to the dual nature climate crisis, while also ensuring more equitable, resilient societies and sustainable model of production and consumption. As the UN Secretary General 2 days ago in his State of the Planet address this week, acknowledged we cannot go back to the old normal of inequality, injustice, and heedless dominion over the earth. Instead, funding should flow to the green economy, resilience, adaptation, and just transition program. But what does mean in practice? I lead in UNDP the Small Island Development Program, which are among the worst affected by the pandemic and most at risk to dual nature climate crisis. Cities are predicted to experience a contraction between 8 to 15%, as heavily tourism dependent country, which up to 27% of the people employed in the sector. The economic shock caused by the pandemic is threatening livelihood. The losses are also harming their ability to finance the nature climate crisis, knowing that the fiscal space is completely narrowed. Cities are at the forefront of experiencing disproportionate losses for climate change. In fact, since 1970, cities have experienced losses of around $150 billion due to climate-related events. Cities were first identified as special cases for development in 1992 in the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, and represent 58 states, which represent nearly 20% of our General Assembly. In cities, UNDP is expanding its support to multiplier that accelerate progress on SDGs, the Samoa Pathway, Paris Agreement, to support a just transition through climate action first, developing blue economies, second, promoting digital transformation. Examples of UNDP support to cities within 3 pillars include small-scale solar power for MSMEs, or empowering community to revive traditional methods for sustainable livelihood. As access to financing is a key enabler of a just transition, green recovery, this work put the natural capital at the center of sustainable development, promoting nature-based solutions that reflect cultural and societal values in protection, conservation, and use of ecosystem goods and services. As the global lead of climate investment platform, a partnership between UNDP, IRENA, Sustainable Energy for All, and GCF, I'm pleased to report that we are helping to encluster the finance investment, the climate finance investment landscape for climate action for those that need to most support to ensure a just green transition. As the UN Secretary General also recently observed, we need to move to large-scale preventive and systematic support that is especially urgent for small island developing states, which face an existential threat to climate change and biodiversity loss. At last year's UN Climate Summit, 50 countries committed to create just transition plan designed to ensure ambitious climate action that delivers significant social gains with decent green jobs. This commitment takes on whole a new level of relevance and urgency in the context of the current crisis. As we enter 2021, which we hope all will reclaim the decade of delivery for the global goals, we must do better, we can do better. It's up to us. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Riyad, for that presentation and setting the floor, interlinking with the COVID situation and how the most vulnerable countries are working on achieving just transition and recovery. So now I would open the floor to the panelists. We'll take questions all together and comments at the end. And I would like to first invite Dr. Tusita Sukatapala, who would be giving a 5-minute intervention on what we discussed during the energy sector on just transition. Dr. Sukatapala, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Washita. Right. I think we have a good foundation to talk now, so a lot of deliberations. Quickly, I think one of the key, aspect we have highlighted again and again is that the challenges for just the transformation or transition is great, like many, but so does the solutions. So, but the challenge basically there is the nature of these, features like multi-facets, multi-stakeholders, and interconnectivity all those will indicate the challenges basically, so that that demand for kind of a holistic approach of solving these issues, and especially looking at a comprehensive solution. So even in any sectors, including energy. So we need some tools and methodologies to work on that. So that's a fundamental requirement. Then when you look at the understanding of the just transition from different sectors, different people, we have different type of understanding. So that's basically okay. But then when you have a common solution to be implemented, then we need the unity within diversity. So in that context, the education, capacity building become very important aspect to be looked at. Especially when you look at the energy sector, now when we look at the clean energy, so we discuss the role of renewable energy and also clean energy and energy transition and the role of just transition in that context. So when you look at the sources, we have enough sources, but then making it sustainable energy is challenging. So that's where the education, awareness, competencies become very important elements there. So we are talking about here just not typical education, but we have to go into lifelong learning. Like even we are talking about the changing lifestyle, because when you talk about especially energy sector, it's not just installing a clean energy source, but then we have to look at how we manage the energy. So this energy conservation, energy management become important, where the lifestyle change is an important aspect. So therefore, altogether, this capacity building or competency building should cover all these aspects: awareness, education, skills, attitudes, values. All has to be targeted there. So that's one important aspect being highlighted, the capacity building aspect. Then the other aspect is we look at the challenges within energy sector, and also aligning, addressing just transition within energy, especially clean energy. So we need the research and development, and also equally important is the innovations. So the innovative aspect, the creativity is not. We are not just talking about innovation in a product, but we are talking about innovation, of course, all the aspects. Innovation in management, innovation in designing, implementation, all aspects. We need innovation. So innovation should be part of the research and development. So that's another important aspect we consider. Then one of the challenges, I think, of course, most of the developing countries is the data, the lack of data. But more critical is not just the data, but also the knowledge created by data. Sometimes we have the raw data, but then of course we don't have the capacity to generate knowledge from the data, and therefore our contribution to the sector development for the society is not there. So therefore we have to have this system where we have data collection as well as a forum or the methodologies or the activities to have this knowledge cycle, and the application of knowledge is important. So especially in that context, we need forums within institutional structure to engage the stakeholders where this knowledge can be generated. So therefore, personally, we have lack of such forum to work with. So therefore, when you are looking at the institutional arrangements, we need to highlight the importance of having a forum for stakeholders to get engaged, and then coming up with solution for the challenging problems. So those are basically the key points I want to highlight. That I want to conclude saying that again, like challenges for just transition is many, but so does the solutions. So it's there. So the solutions are there. So we have to make sure that those can be implemented by addressing the challenges we have. With that, I will conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sugatapala, for summarizing what we spoke in the session on energy sector. Now I would move on to the food sector. We have two interventions for the food sector. Shall I start with you, Duncan? So Duncan is the founder and director at Nourishing Food Systems, and he will give a 5-minute intervention followed by Raphael, who's the International Policy and Public Affairs Specialist at ProVeg International. Duncan,
yes.
over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll probably touch on sort of the key aspects of what we discussed and what we went into, and I'll probably leave Raphael to talk about the group sessions, so divide it neatly. But the big things around the food and just transition was one of the things that came up is in this sort of during these times of COVID, the food system has shown itself to be sort of have a split personality. You've got the large food system dominated by global trade, commodity markets, ultra processed food, where this sector has actually done quite well or hasn't been disrupted by COVID. And this has benefited many big businesses. It's meant food has got onto the plates all around the world. However, this sector, which has done very well, is the opposite of the sector we're talking about in just transition, because the food sector which was most hit by COVID is the smallholder producers, the food sector that looks at sort of producing local food for local markets. It's the fresh produce, it's the culturally diverse sector. This was hit far greater by COVID, with farmers being impacted, markets being closed down, people in urban settings having less access to fresh food. So you've seen the food system divide into two as a result of COVID. The business as usual one, which says we've done well, we're resilient, even though they're not taking account the environmental and social impacts, or the one that's built on the smaller, the more local system, which has suffered, which has been impacted. And however, going forward, what we recognize is that we can come up with solutions which start looking at just transition, looking at food sovereignty, agroecological approaches. It's the need to relocalize food systems and supply chains. And when you do that, making sure that they're inclusive, that they support vulnerable communities, that they're built on agroecological principles that take into account nature. So you have a regenerative, resilient agricultural system. They're also going to take into account cultural diversity and the need to respect different choices. And this is going to be really, really key. And to deliver it, you need to work with farmers. We need to work with the youth. We need to work with communities. And that's going to build into greater South-South coalitions and South-South groups working together, stepping away from a narrative around food, which is often dominated by northern institutions and international bodies. And this is very much going to be about people working together, bringing the farmers together with the citizens who live in cities, and working with local government and local governance systems to deliver this resilient food system that we need. It's also going to be very much about creating trust and trust building between these sectors, but also rebuilding trust against the international community who haven't engaged enough with people on the ground and with local actors. And so there needs to be trust going both ways, because only once the farmers, local communities trust the people at the international sector will they really be able to start working together concretely. And the other part we need to look at is the need for concrete actions. So instead of having another meeting, another global summit, another roadmap developed, it's all about concrete actions and how are we going to have these actions going forward, how are they going to be facilitated, how are they going to be funded. And this will feed into the global processes. People have talked about the upcoming Food Systems Summit, COP26, and they are great opportunities to push the just transition and agroecological processes to the fore, to come up with solutions that we do need in these times. But we have to then make sure at these summits that this narrative is heard, that the voices of the smaller producers, of smallholders, are represented fully. And a criticism that has come about of these international processes is that they are happening at an international level with the same usual suspects, with the same players, the same bodies who are not as engaged and not representing the voices fully of the smaller, more localized communities. And we've got an opportunity now to work to shift that and change that and have the representation at the level we need while delivering change on the ground. That's all I have to say, but I'll pass over to Raphael now.
Thank you. Raphael, over to you.
Thank you, Duncan. Yeah, I think it was a very good wrap-up of actually the discussion this morning. That was, I think, was really, really interesting. I think what was encouraging first is that we were all like in agreement to on what kind of just transition we want and where we want to go, which is like to more plant rich, even though it can be like including you know, different aspects according to regions, etc., but like more plant centered like diets and like agricultural practices that favor more sustainable practices as agroecology, etc. So I thought it was like real good to have that, you know, as a common basis. And I thought we had like a good overview of like what can happen next year, of course, with the Food System Summit and COP26. I think one concrete outcome that we had is the need of having an action plan and having more data, more numbers, and more like also concrete examples of like what the just transition can look like for farmers. That was another big point, like the need to have like you know, like a narrative that doesn't necessarily come from the north, but that is also taking like, you know, centering more like on also like different regions of the world. So I thought it was like yeah, very interesting, and I think we should like really also consider working on a kind of action plan strategy in having like in mind, of course, what's happening next year, but also with like the revisions of the NDCs around 2023, and it would be good to kind of build on this coalition and try to come with some like concrete actions in an action plan going in this direction for agricultural discussions around climate, especially. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Raphael. Now we move to our last thematic session, which was on gender and cross-cutting themes. We have two panelists from the session. I will start with Ms. Fleur Newman, who's the unit lead for UNFCCC for the themes AIDS, Gender and Youth. And then I'll move to Mr. Chanyo Chong, Chief Executive Officer, Carbon Care Lab. So I'll start with you, Fleur, and then I'll move to you, Mr. Chong.
Thank you very much, and I thank you again for the opportunity to engage in this session. It was very insightful, and the session focused on cross-cutting issues related to just transition, which includes gender, but also social protection, skills development, inclusion, capacity building, and many other aspects. I think the speakers focused on a variety of things, and that included the need for gender responsive action, integration of just transition into policy processes, the need for capacity building and skills development in achieving climate commitments, as well as providing some concrete examples of what just transition could look like through case studies, among others on the food sector and risk management. For me, something that was reinforced in not only the speakers but also in the breakout group session was the need for better mechanisms for coordinating with international and national frameworks, and that's policy frameworks, sort of in the broadest possible sense, and local community action, because what was very clear from the case studies is that, and I think this came out also in the previous sessions, is that whilst there are significant challenges, there are also good practices, and the communities are finding solutions that work for them in terms of just transition. So one of the other things is about how we better communicate those good practices to ensure that others are aware of them. Data was also something that came up as being a gap and a challenge, that community level data is is challenging, but that it's necessary because without it, there isn't visibility of the particular circumstances, and that context matters, and there is nuance at the community level that really matters when you go to implementation. So the need for better data, particularly at a community level, was highlighted, and this is something that is a recurring theme when we talk about gender responsive climate policy and action, is the need for better sex disaggregated data, but not only sex disaggregated data that's also identifying other aspects of whether it's vulnerability or in terms of who is doing what and who needs to be involved in decision making. So data also around age and ethnicity and disability, and so an intersectional, multi-dimensional aspect of data is important. And there was also quite a strong focus on the issues that are perhaps left out of other just transition conversations around those who are not seen in formal data, so those who are in the informal sector or who are migrating and in a temporary way, and that's not being picked up in the formal data that's available, and that this is a big part of what happens. And there was also a discussion around the social protection and what social protection is can be made up of, and an important point about the fact that a suite of social protection measures is important, because there isn't going to be one that fits and applies to all, and so you need a package of social protection measures. And I think I'll stop there and hand over to my co-speaker for this session.
Well,
Thank you, Fleur. Yes, over to you, Mr. Chong.
Okay, thank you. We brought up some social issues that are already in existence. The issues of poverty, of decent housing, jobs. These are existing challenges in urban area and also in rural areas. Essentially the SDGs. So we talk about COVID and also its challenges and how to bring back better. The idea is the urgency to develop green stimulation programs and not waiting for a short-term considerations in policies to quickly create jobs, especially in tourism, transport, and without regard to a green alternatives. So that in a way, the green investments, the urgency to develop programs addressing unemployment, jobs, creations, and also addressing decent housing. So these are the things that need urgent priority in the COVID emergencies, so that when we go back, we can go back better. Now, there is also issues of inclusion. We need to identify vulnerable groups, disabled, elderly, low income, and how they are being affected or forgotten in the increased challenges in climate change. So climate change may not bring new issues of social justice, but they may intensify already known social justice or injustice. So I think for me, it is very important for the climate activists or climate workers to collaborate with civil society, other who are concerned about other social issues. So essentially overcoming the artificial divide among civil society, that's important. So increasingly we need to bring together people from different sectors together and to have a community dialogue on just transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chong. It was great to have the session we had and the wider spectrum of issues that we discussed during the cross-cutting issues. So thank you for sharing the insights that we shared during the session, the group work. A big thank you to the panelists. I will come back to you, but I would like to, I'm hoping I'm not going to put you on the spot, Riyad, but a question to you, if you would like to make any comments based on what you heard right now from what we've been discussing during the sessions.
I like the last intervention, especially the role of civil society and the role also of focusing on the one who are left behind. And this is the most important part of our work in the transition. We cannot just do the work without thinking about the one who are left behind, focusing because they are the one that we have to lead, they are the one that we need to support. The three main areas that you mentioned are also important, and this is what I have said in my opening remarks, especially social protection is one of the key elements. Of course, agriculture, food is important, energy is important, that we are developing different things, but we need to think about, we are in the fourth industrial revolution where digital transformation is one of the enabler for adopting new development models. So that is something very important to take into account in transitioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Riyad, for that comment. We will have another round of comments to the panelists and open the floor to any other speakers who joined us as well. Before that, I would like to ask my colleague Sinasha whether she would like to put the Mentimeter question on, and we'll ask the participation from others also to discuss what would be the way ahead in the work that we could be doing following these discussions. Sinasha?
Thanks, Posita. So to everyone here, please look at the chat. I have dropped in a message. So if you can, please log on to www.menti.com and enter the code 4131428. Sorry, let me just type it again. 31428. And this would direct you to a question that we have presented now, which is on going forward, what should be the next steps to facilitate and enhance just transition? So you could keep your answers short and you could enter more than one response if you would like to. And as you enter this, the answers will come up on the screen.
Okay.
Sorry, Sanasha, let's give about 10-15 minutes to ask the same question to the panelists. And while we're discussing, everyone could provide the input via Mentimeter. Not Mentimeter, menti.com, sorry. It's been a long day, sorry. So let me ask the same question from the panelists. What do you see as the next steps? And I'll also take answers from others who would like to provide input as well. So if you have answers, please type your name in the chat box. I'll tell your name and you can unmute yourself and speak. So the question is, what would be the next steps going forward to facilitate and enhance just transition? What actions can we take? What do you see us doing? How can we be of benefit to scale up actions? So multiple ways of answering the question. Who would like to go first? Yes,
okay, first. I think a series of deep community dialogues should be launched to consolidate civil society, government, and to also build a bridge with government, business, and NGOs to come up with a green transition or just transition agenda. So I would say that's the next steps.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? Should I request the panelists? Dr. Sugadapala, would you like to add?
Yes, yeah, very quickly. I think along with the earlier comment, I think one of the challenges we are having is the participation of the stakeholders, and we don't have forum to, get involved. So especially the policymakers act, separately, and then their understanding on these topics we are talking here is different from what the other stakeholders are, having. So therefore, we need better cooperation, involvement. So I think next stage is to put up that type of forum. So, especially policymakers, maybe government institutions, the implementers, their involvement. Or the engagement with the stakeholders, maybe civil society, general public. So we don't have forums for that. I think so therefore, as indicated earlier too, that the more the capacity building or awareness and forum for them to get involved it should be a priority. So we have to mobilize all the stakeholders towards common goal. Presently, we don't have that forums in place. So I think that's one important aspect to be considered in immediate terms. Yeah. So I will conclude with that.
Thank you, Dr. Sugadapala. Could I request Raphael to provide any inputs if you would like to?
Sure. I think one of the concrete way forward, or like concrete actions that we could have, it was like mentioned that we would need like to rely more on like data and like having concrete solutions, and that was like something that came like in the group, the need for having like a concrete action plan that showcases what we want to achieve with the deadline 2023 in mind. But it's like it's 3 years or 2.5 years to work on something that we can present and try to influence also like decision makers with this concrete plan. I think there was like enough like actually agreement on what needs to be achieved, on what kind of food system we want to have, and how it can be fair to producers, but also to the consumers, as we know that there is like a huge part of the population either obese or like suffering from malnutrition. So there was like kind of like an agreement, and I think there was like this idea to have like really some concrete recommendations when we spoke about NDCs, about the lack of food NDCs, and the fact that we were kind of like disappointed, even though there was like some kind of like start in that direction, but we need to do much more on that. So that was like the idea when it came to also advocating at the UN on those topics.
Thank you, Raphael. I'll go to Fleur now and then come to you, Duncan, if that's okay. Fleur, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you. And I think I'm just sort of building on some of the things that I've already heard. I think one of the things that was a bit challenging about our session today was that we didn't have enough time to go into a lot of detail of some of the really interesting case studies. So I think one of the other things that we need to be doing, as I said, is to communicate about those case studies, but also then to potentially have deeper dives into, you know, what has worked and why it's worked and how it's worked, so that these things can be, there can be peer-to-peer country exchange and learning, but also for organizations who are supporting this work so that they can also learn from good practice. And I think, so I mean, I think one of the key things is about raising awareness, but also creating forums for technical discussion and exchange of good practice, and also the challenges that are being faced. But where solutions are being found to particular issues, whether it's around data or around you know, sort of sector-specific issues, it would be it's very important that to the extent possible, it's shared as broadly as possible. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Fleur. Duncan, over to you now.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I just want to sort of, again, build on what's been said. And a couple of things. I think something that would be quite concrete is working with people to have their voices properly heard and listened to and escalated up the value chain. Because I've heard, I think we understand the problems. We've had a lot of research going on and a lot of research is being commissioned, but often you hear big global institutions, companies, research bodies, NGOs sort of talking about the role of local communities, local producers, whether it's energy or food, and how they're key to providing the solution. But however, when you go and talk to them, and I used to work for some of these organizations, they've never actually gone down and spoken to local communities. So I think there's a real opportunity to work out how we can get these groups to be heard and their voices echoed and raised so that their concerns and worries are really listened to and a part of the debate. And I do think there's opportunities throughout 2021 into 2022 with things like sort of, you can have the Commonwealth Games, etc., going on up to 2023 to have almost a program of work to keep the voices being escalated so that we can move into a period where they're heard, they're listened to, the needs are met, and we have this just transition that we need fully underway, well ahead of the sort of 2030 deadline at the end of the SDGs. And I also think to accompany this is, as has been touched on, how do we speed up digitalization and have the digitalization along the supply chain? So I think there's great opportunities then to have harmonious digitalization to deliver a lot more and to have things moving quicker.
Thank you, Duncan. I hope I didn't miss any of the panelists. Riyad, would you like to add anything as steps to be taken going forward before I open the floor to other speakers?
One thing that I see, which is important, is to make sure that we do not see, when we talk about energy or food, we do not see that in silos, but we need to see interconnections about those issues, and that is the most important thing. The digital transformation or digital tools are a way to hear the voice of the one who are left behind, especially the one of the civil society who can contribute concretely to decisions on development policies and transitions. Thank you.
Thank you, Riyad, and the other panelists. I would now like to request others who would like to add their points to speak. I see a few speakers from the other sessions who are here as well. I will allow them to share their insights. Denis, would you like to speak?
Yes, sure. So I think I would agree with a lot of what the other speakers have already said. I think it would be vital to build networks and coalitions and get actually what was just said, the input from the ground level into the policy making processes, into the decision making processes, and actually get that input and also get the data from a community level and a household level to really understand what the needs are for specific communities and within communities, and how this can be brought into the policy process and integrated into it. And I think we have, like we discussed, and it was a very interesting discussion, the various vulnerabilities that are there and the different needs of different communities and different elements inside the community. Different needs, like depending on gender, depending on economic status, on capabilities, on specific factors. And to bring all this together, both through research and collect this data and engagement, I think would be very vital if we're going to go forward on this. And one more point, maybe, I think we also need to broaden the scope a bit. I just put this into the Mentimeter because I didn't know I would be put on the spot here to talk, but I'm happy to say this as well. We have discussed the food sector, the energy sector, and also the cross-cutting issues, but there are some other sectors I think we need to look at as well for just transition. Sectors like waste management, like small-scale industries, like construction, sectors like tourism even, where a lot of workers might have to transition to different like either production methods or even different, like their jobs might be lost completely. And to recognize that and find a way to address this, and also especially the informal workers in these sectors, would be very, very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Denis. So I would open the floor to anyone who would like to share their insights for the next 5 minutes. Would anyone like to comment? What do you think needs to happen? What we need to do? Anything about the summit sessions? I see some people who attended all the sessions, which is amazing. Thank you very much for joining us throughout the day and being part of all the sessions, following on the discussions. Is there anyone who would like to speak or share their comments? Okay. I think people are shy to speak while they guess. Okay, so I think I will ask Senashia to share the responses that we received on menti.com. Senashia, if you could summarize what we have there.
Sure. Thanks, Wasita. I'm hoping that you can see my screen in 2 minutes. Right, so these are some of the responses that we received. Thank you to everyone who submitted these responses. So some of the responses that we received in order to facilitate and enhance just transition as steps moving forward is to raise awareness of the issue of just transition in different sectors. There was also to communicate, raise awareness on the importance of considering just transition in the NDCs, NAPs across many climate impacted sectors. Also to ask local communities about their needs for just transition and the kind of guarantees and information they would need to build trust and to engage in this. As well as broadening the discussion, just transition will be vital for sectors beyond energy and food, for example, for waste management, construction, small-scale industries, tourism. There's also for capacity building, training, and skill development for politicians, policy and decision makers, so they are better equipped to make informed just transition related plans and policies. And two more, getting input from the ground level and feeding it into international and intergovernmental processes, as well as mobilization of all stakeholders towards a common goal with the continuous dialogue among them, need for a conducive environment, forums to share the concerns of all stakeholders reflecting societal challenges and priorities. So thank you very much to everyone who submitted your responses. They will actually feed into the larger output or knowledge product that we hope to generate through this discussion. So thank you very much for taking time and logging in and dropping your answers.
Okay, so that is pretty much the closing of our two-day summit. A big thank you to everyone, the speakers, the co-leading organizations. I actually wrote this down so we don't miss anyone. So we had a few organizations officially co-leading sessions, the UNFCCC, APN, 50x40, ProVeg International, and FES. And then we also had organizations like ILO and other organizations contributing and co-leading the thematic discussions. So a big thank you to all the organizations. And then we also had over 200 registrations for this session and the summit that is, and that shows a big interest among different stakeholders to engage in this conversation. So that's motivating, and we look forward to working on this topic and engaging with everyone. 5 sessions completed, over 25 experts contributing, and amazing participation during group work. So it was a great experience for all of us, this summit that we organized, probably one of the successful ones we did, the most successful ones. So I see Senasha applauding, that's good. And a big thank you to all the panelists for this session who contributed, who joined throughout, most of you did. And also a big thank you to the team at Slack and Trust behind the scene, managing everything, emails, note-taking, I guess morning till 4 a.m. in the night. So thank you very much and appreciate all your work. And I shall stop now, and hopefully we'll see you again soon at a different summit. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Idea.
Thank you.